Hello, it's Joyful Hermit, and I found another portion of what had been told me years ago, about 15, 16 years ago, um, from his real presence regarding prison life, life inside his sacred heart, and that which he willed for me and wills for everyone. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit desire all of us to remain in his love and to be in his abode and their abode within us. And it's perhaps a mystical view, but it's very we have ability to grasp through all the temporal imagery that is given us. Um, Also, I want to express a little more what I mean about the canonical status versus the privately professed or living out the hermit life. And many of my favorite hermits, Santa Rosalia of the Middle Ages, whose bones were discovered in 1600 through her vision of appearing to someone, telling them where to find her. Um, all of these, including Mary of Bethany, who was a hermit, who went to Gaul after Christ's crucifixion and ascension with her brother Lazarus and sister Martha, and this is according to what St. Augustine wrote of this about 2.5 centuries later. But she lived a hermit life and in true adoration of Christ, in prayer, and she was not canonically approved. They didn't have such things then. The canonical approval, canonical status is relatively a recent development, again, I think due to the concern of abuses. However, I would like to point out that there's just no way that they can actually stop all of the abuses even within the canonical hermits. I know of some who have tabernacles but who don't have Mass celebrated there and the sacred host exchanged every 2 weeks. Um, Bishops vary in who they canonically approve. I've just learned of one who is quite young who was approved. And to me, that then taints or cheapens. If we're going to have rules and we're going to have laws, then those laws need to be followed. But it's like in the secular world. There's no way with all the laws and all the rules that they have the manpower through our courts, through our law officials to follow up on every abuse. They can't do it. So it becomes then, it seems to me, these are my opinions based upon some facts, um, but also on observation and experience over some time period, that then it becomes other people's practically lifelong desire or journey to try to keep up with all the laws and to try to enforce or to um, right the wrongs through writing, pointing out technicalities such as witness versus reception. That has come up. That my vows were received by a priest, which indeed they were. But that is now being picked over as no, that would just be a witness, and that received is this and that, and then pretty soon we're outside of his sacred heart. We are totally consumed with these technicalities that bishops themselves and dioceses themselves are in variance upon already. That's the reality. Um, I know of some non-canonical hermits who have tabernacles in their home chapels, and priests or bishops have allowed that. So you see, it becomes sort of an endless merry-go-round, and pretty soon we're so totally distracted. So I want to read now the additional to the last video post on what His Real Presence said about prison life and the joy of it, and to be within His sacred heart. Okay, I had asked questions about what prison life should be for me, because he had told me that I was a prisoner of his love. This is for all of us too. Any of those who desire. It's very simple, and it's not something that is ever regulated, really. I'm talking of a different realm and a different mode. However, it's also very much through the Mass. The Mass is the stairway to heaven. The Mass is heaven on earth. So I'm a very orthodox, very devout Roman Catholic, and very obedient. My dear little butterfly, more like a moth you are, dressed in your silly gray and white. Your playfulness doth amuse me. I wore gray and white striped jumper for a while in my prison life. Of course, you wish to be my model prisoner. This is no surprise, as I placed at birth within your infant heart a willingness to please. Listen to those who can teach you from earth, your godmother, my beloved sons, my priests, all these whom you trust and love. Listen to my spirit in its many forms and nuances, as I come to you in ways of increasing subtlety, and this to train your ear to hear, your heart to act. Listen to me when I tell you to stop, when I tell you to go, when I tell you to cry, and when I tell you to sing praises to me. Listen to me when I tell you to speak and when I tell you to be silent. And you know well which is the more difficult for you. A model prisoner child is one who does my will, always. And this is not easy for my children who live in the world. You do good deeds, but flutter blindly ahead. I help you now by making you my prisoner. Yes, now you get the picture. In my prison, you are beautifully chained to my will, for I train you to submit, to follow, to speak when spoken to, and to obey my commands. And then he had continued on with what I had shared previously of being in his will and of the seemingly darkness or insignificance of prison life, but of the great beauty and the great warmth and depth of being in his sacred heart. And perhaps that's what may be different about some as opposed to others. I learned it was the first summer during my private instruction from a priest to become a Catholic. I had had an experience of bilocating that my mother and my aunts were aware of. My mother sort of understood. My aunts were dumbfounded, but I had been taken someplace. Maybe I'll share the details another time. Probably it doesn't matter. But it was validated, it was verified, and when I was back and was awakened, I heard 3 times a voice say, "Think with your heart, think with your heart, think with your heart." And I realized that what I had experienced for the first time that I knew, I had been elsewhere in a hospital room and had seen and comforted someone, a relative. And then my mother and aunts had gone up the next day, but I had forewarned them that a circumstance with their brother had changed. And my mother and my aunts argued with me. "Oh no, how would you know? You haven't even left this house, you know." They came back and were dumbfounded, but my mother said, "You knew, you were there, weren't you?" And I had been during the night. And I think in order for me to even realize much of what the Lord has for all of us, that I had to stop thinking so much with my intellect, with my head, and start thinking with my heart, because that is where we learn faith and great belief and learn to adapt to many of the nuances of the spiritual life and the reality of eternity where we are going to be. And it is not to disdain or to deny the laws of the temporal Catholic world or the temporal secular world. We should not do that. But perhaps the Lord chooses, and indeed He does, what aspects or what pathways He wants for us. And if some become mottled with humanness anyway, then perhaps they are not necessary. And that's what I am suggesting, is that perhaps canonical approval is not necessary. And indeed it isn't, or it would not be in the Catechism the option of the other. Nor would it have been for centuries the only way that hermits was to be called by the Lord and to live their hermit vocation. They did not have canonical approval for the vast majority of time period. And even just the idea of approval, or some call it canonical status, I have to realize I was never one for status. I guess I must accept my inconsequential being and the lack of identity, and more of a deeper call to nothingness of myself, but all in Him. So I mean no offense to those people who are called to canonical status or canonical approval, nor to the institution of it. I'm sure it was all well intended and necessary, or that somebody in the hierarchy felt it was necessary, and perhaps it was. I don't know. I don't know anything about all of that, of the think with your head kind of things. My call is to help teach men and women how to stabilize their emotions through spirituality, through the way, the truth, and the life of His real presence, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And with that, God bless His real presence in you.